I still remember that Tuesday morning like it happened yesterday, although it should have been the kind of day that drifts by unnoticed, just another gray sky over Dallas, Texas, and me trying to drink my second cup of coffee before heading to the office. My name is Michael Thompson. I am 34 years old, and I have spent the last decade building a life that most people would call comfortable. I have a good job at a mid-sized logistics firm, a sturdy Ford F-150 that I keep immaculate because it feels like a part of my identity, and a home in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the streets are lined with oak trees and manicured lawns, where neighbors wave politely, and nothing ever really changes. I have a family, or at least I thought I did, a wife named Lauren who claimed to be frequently traveling for business, and a 12-year-old son named Danny, who had just started playing Little League Baseball and thought the World Series was the ultimate goal of life. I loved them both fiercely, perhaps too fiercely, though I would have never admitted it out loud. I had always believed in the kind of loyalty that could survive anything. I had always believed that my marriage was an unshakable fortress. But that morning, as I scrolled through my emails on my laptop at Starbucks, a little voice in my gut whispered something I had never expected. Suspicion. Lauren's work schedule had always been a point of pride for her. She ran a small consulting business for family-owned companies, traveling across Texas and neighboring states, meeting clients in fancy hotels, sipping espresso in high-rise boardrooms, always dressed impeccably in tailored suits that somehow made her both unapproachable and magnetic. I would sometimes joke to myself that she was like a character in a television show, too polished to be real. But that day, there was something different. She had texted me at 7 a.m., saying that she was leaving for Austin on a business trip, but the message felt off, almost mechanical, like someone reading lines from a script that had been rehearsed too many times. Normally, she would leave a little note about Danny, reminders about his lunch or his soccer practice, but there was nothing, just a cold, perfunctory text and her signature sign-off. I tried to push it aside, tried to convince myself that I was overthinking it. After all, suspicion is a dangerous thing. It grows silently, like mold in the damp corners of a house, until it spreads and consumes everything in sight. But there was one thing I could not ignore. A week earlier, I had noticed a pattern in Lauren's business trips that did not make sense. The hotel addresses she provided never matched the locations of the companies she claimed to be visiting. Her phone often went straight to voicemail during supposed client meetings. And on more than one occasion, I had glanced at her calendar and seen entries labeled strategy session that were conveniently erased by the time I got home. I am not a paranoid man by nature. I pride myself on being rational, the kind of guy who makes decisions based on evidence rather than feeling. But there is a line between intuition and instinct, and my gut had started screaming that Lauren was crossing it. Betrayal, I realized with a cold knot forming in my stomach, was not something that announced itself with fireworks. It seeped quietly into the cracks of everyday life, leaving traces that only someone paying attention could see. So I began watching, not in a creepy, obsessive way, at least I tried to tell myself that. I started noticing little things, the faint smell of perfume that did not match her usual scent, the lipstick smudges on the rim of her coffee cup that she had not washed properly, her sudden obsession with staying late at the office. The more I observed, the more I felt like I was piecing together a puzzle that I had been blind to for years. I started taking notes, writing down times, dates, and locations, building a map of her movements that slowly revealed a story I did not want to believe. Infidelity, I whispered to myself one evening while Danny was asleep, is a disease that infects not just the spouse, but the entire family. The thought made my chest tighten. It was Thursday when I found the first tangible clue. Lauren had left her tablet at home, something she never did, and I could not resist opening it. My heart pounded as I navigated through her calendar and email, my fingers trembling. There it was, a booking confirmation for a hotel in Austin under her name, a luxury suite at the Fairmont, and the dates matched exactly with her business trip. But the address did not match any client she had mentioned. And then, the clincher, buried in the metadata of an email, a timestamp showing that she had checked in at the hotel 30 minutes before sending a professional-looking email claiming to be in a meeting across town. I leaned back in my chair, letting the realization sink in. My wife, the woman I had trusted completely, the woman I had shared my life and family with, was lying. The word betrayal echoed in my mind, louder than any alarm. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed next to Lauren, who was pretending to read a book, unaware that I was fully awake, my mind racing. I imagined scenarios, each more fantastical than the last. Was it just a fling? Was it with someone she had known before me, someone from college or from her family's social circle? My imagination was a dangerous tool, painting vivid scenes in my mind, from hotel rooms with half-open blinds and cheap champagne to secret rendezvous in dimly lit corridors. I could almost see her laughing with someone else, her hand brushing against another man's as if it were mine. The thought made me sick, but I could not stop. Infidelity has a way of turning ordinary people into detectives, spies in their own homes, and I had become one without realizing it. By Friday, I knew I had to confront the reality. I could not sit idly while my family was being undermined by secrets and lies. I packed a small bag under the guise of a business trip of my own and rented a car. I would follow her to Austin, not yet knowing what I would do when I arrived, but certain that I could no longer be a passive observer. Every mile I drove, I felt the tension building, each stoplight a drumbeat of anxiety in my chest. I imagined that at any moment, Lauren would turn the corner, laughing with someone else, and the illusion of our life would shatter completely. But somewhere along the drive, as the cityscape of Austin grew closer, my mind began to wander into darker territories, the kind of paranoid fantasies I had never allowed myself before. What if this was not just an affair? What if she had become part of some clandestine network of deception, an underground society where infidelity was celebrated and husbands were mere pawns? The thought was absurd, yet I could not shake it. It gave the entire trip an air of surrealism, as if I had stepped into a movie where the line between reality and fantasy had blurred, where every hotel lobby, every valet attendant, every corridor could be hiding secrets I was not yet ready to uncover. As I checked into a hotel near the Fairmont, my heart was pounding with a mixture of fear, anticipation, and a strange, almost bitter humor. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on me. Here I was, a man who believed in loyalty, morality, and family values, sneaking through Austin like some low-budget action hero, driven by the possibility that my wife, my partner in life, was betraying everything I thought we shared. Betrayal is a curious thing. It feels heavier in reality than in imagination. It is a weight you carry alone until it consumes you, twisting every thought, coloring every interaction, until the world itself feels like a stage for deceit. I sat in my hotel room that night, staring at the city lights through the window, imagining what I would find, imagining the confrontation, imagining the fallout, and realizing that my life, my family, my sense of self might never be the same again. The story, I knew, had only just begun. The pieces were falling into place, each one a sharp reminder that betrayal can wear many faces, often disguised as love, commitment, and ordinary life. And yet, despite the dread and anger simmering inside me, I felt a strange exhilaration. There was power in knowing the truth, even if the truth hurt. There was clarity in suspicion realized, in betrayal uncovered, in the first steps toward confronting what had been hidden. By the time I fell asleep, exhaustion overtaking both fear and anticipation, I understood that the coming days would demand every ounce of cunning, courage, and American ingenuity I possessed. My cheating wife, I thought, as sleep claimed me, had set in motion a story that would test everything I believed about love, family, and betrayal. I woke up to the faint hum of traffic outside my hotel window, the kind of early morning noise that makes a city feel alive even before most people have opened their eyes. My hands were clammy, and the coffee I brewed in the tiny hotel room tasted bitter, but it was the adrenaline that made it almost unbearable. I had checked the Fairmont's address again and again, memorizing the layout from the digital map, noting where the valet stood, where the lobby elevators opened, and which corridor led to the suites. I had convinced myself that I was doing this purely for Danny, for the family that had been quietly fractured by deceit. But somewhere deep inside, I knew part of me was also there for the spectacle, to catch my cheating wife in the act, to see betrayal in its rawest form. By 10:30, I was out the door, my rented SUV parked in the shadow of the hotel, blending into the mundane morning traffic. I followed the valet's uniform with the precision of a surveillance operative, tracing every movement, every minor detail. The absurdity of my situation did not escape me. Here I was, a 34-year-old man, tailing my spouse like some amateur private investigator, all because my cheating wife had decided that honesty was optional. In the reflection of the glass doors, I caught a glimpse of myself, and for a moment I laughed bitterly. I looked like a caricature of every revenge story I had ever mocked online, the kind you see trending on Reddit, with hashtags like #betrayal and #cheating wife. But this was not entertainment. This was my life unraveling in high definition. I waited in the hotel lobby, pretending to sip a latte while scanning the check-in screens, and then I saw her. Lauren appeared at the end of the corridor, her heels clicking with that confident rhythm I had once loved. She was talking to a man whose face made my stomach twist. Tall, dark, sharply dressed, with a charm that made it almost insulting that she had chosen him over me, over our family. My brain registered the details with alarming clarity. His cologne mixed subtly with hers in the air, the way she leaned slightly closer than necessary, the hand gestures that spoke louder than words. My heart pounded, a percussive warning that betrayal had not been a fantasy. My cheating wife was in that hotel, in the lobby, with another man. I followed them, keeping a safe distance, pretending to be a tourist while my mind replayed every memory I had of our life together. The dinner parties, the Saturday soccer games, the mundane evenings on the couch, all of it now tainted by the knowledge that it had been accompanied by secrets, lies, and infidelity. I almost convinced myself that maybe this was a setup, a misunderstanding, the kind of error that life throws at you to test your patience. But the way Lauren laughed, that subtle glance she gave him, the way his hand brushed against hers in a gesture far too intimate for business, told me everything I needed to know. I trailed them to the elevators, watching as they pressed the button for the executive suites. And then I made a choice that would define the next hours of my life. I could call her out in the lobby, risk a scene, and maybe gain the immediate satisfaction of confrontation, or I could follow her discreetly, gather the proof, and orchestrate the kind of revenge that most men only dream about in late-night internet forums. I chose the latter. My rational mind, the one that had kept me grounded in my career and life, took the reins. If infidelity was to be the weapon in her arsenal, then I would turn it into my strategy. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. Every ding of the floor indicator was a drumbeat in my chest. I could see Lauren's reflection in the metal doors, unaware that her husband had become a silent observer of the scene, that I was tracing her every movement with the meticulous attention of a military tactician. When the elevator opened on the 23rd floor, I followed at a cautious distance. Slipping into the hallway shadows, my eyes locked on the suite number she had checked into. I could almost feel the walls breathing around me, the way the hotel seemed to hold its secrets in the polished wood panels and faint floral carpet scent. And then it happened. The door to the suite opened, and they stepped inside, closing it behind them. I waited, counting the seconds in a way that made them stretch like hours. I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear the muffled voices, catching snippets of laughter and conversation, the kind that was casual yet intimate, a language I had once shared with Lauren but was now foreign to me. Infidelity is a subtle thing, I realized, not in the gestures but in the comfort, the ease, the unspoken codes between two people who are betraying someone else. The absurdity of the situation escalated in my mind. What if they were not just having an affair, but plotting something larger, some elaborate conspiracy? Lauren, my cheating wife, involved in a secret network of deception that could reach beyond our marriage. The thought made me chuckle quietly, a dry, bitter laugh that echoed in the hallway. It was so ridiculous that it almost felt like fiction. Yet there it was, reality, in high definition, in 3D, unfolding inside a hotel suite. I slipped my phone out of my pocket and began taking photos through the slightly ajar door. Each click of the shutter felt like a declaration of power, a reclamation of control over the chaos that betrayal had unleashed. I captured Lauren's expressions, the gestures, the moments that were intimate yet oblivious to my gaze. Every photo was a bullet, every angle a piece of evidence. I imagined showing these to her later, not in a fit of rage but as a statement of reality. This is what your choices look like when no one is watching but me. Time stretched. Minutes became hours. The city of Austin moved outside in a blur of taxis and morning sunlight, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the suite. I considered my options, plotting in real time. Confrontation seemed almost too obvious, too pedestrian. Perhaps the better move was to let the narrative escalate, to let her continue believing she was untouchable until the culmination, when the betrayal would be revealed in a context so dramatic that even the most imaginative YouTube storyteller would pause in admiration. My mind wandered into absurd hypotheticals. What if I enlisted the help of hotel staff to accidentally catch her in a compromising situation in front of a family of visiting executives? What if I staged a scenario that made her realize the full impact of her infidelity on our family, on Danny, on our life? The possibilities were as endless as they were theatrical. Eventually, Lauren and her ex left the suite, laughing and talking, oblivious to the fact that I had been there, invisible, documenting their betrayal. My heart pounded, a mix of fury, pain, and twisted satisfaction. I had what I needed. Cheating wife, betrayal, family, infidelity. They were no longer abstract concepts. They were tangible, measurable, captured in evidence that would serve as both shield and sword. As I drove back to my hotel, replaying every detail, I realized that something had shifted within me. This was no longer just about catching a cheating wife. It was about understanding the fragile architecture of trust, the delicate latticework of family bonds, and the capacity for betrayal to corrode the foundations of what we take for granted. I was both wounded and empowered, angry yet strategic, hurt yet oddly exhilarated. The next steps would require careful planning, patience, and a willingness to embrace the absurdity of the human condition, where love, loyalty, and deception coexist in a precarious balance. By the time night fell, I had mapped out a plan, one that involved more than just confrontation. It would be a psychological chess game, a series of maneuvers designed to reveal, expose, and ultimately reclaim the narrative of my life. Lauren, my cheating wife, had set the stage, but I was ready to take the lead. The betrayal had ignited a fire, and I was determined to see it through to its theatrical, inevitable conclusion. The day after my surveillance, I woke with a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The betrayal was no longer a rumor, no longer a gnawing suspicion that kept me awake at night. It was a tangible, screaming reality. My cheating wife, Lauren, had crossed a line, one that I could no longer ignore. But I did not rush to confrontation. Instead, I allowed my mind to spiral into possibilities, scenarios that alternated between meticulous strategy and absurd paranoia. By 9 o'clock, I was convinced that this was more than infidelity. There had to be a network, a cabal, perhaps even some clandestine Austin society that orchestrated cheating spouses for their amusement. I began my day by reviewing the photos I had taken in the hotel suite. Each image was a piece of the puzzle: Lauren's laugh, the tilt of her head, the casual intimacy that spoke louder than words. I cataloged them meticulously on my laptop, labeling them by timestamp, angle, and emotional intensity. There was a certain artistry in the betrayal, a theatricality that demanded recognition. I could almost hear a narrator from one of those YouTube channels intoning dramatic lines. In the quiet heart of betrayal, a man's life hung in balance, teetering between love and fury. I smirked at the thought. Parody had already begun to creep into my imagination. By noon, I had mapped out Lauren's week. She had meetings scheduled, lunches with colleagues, and, most dangerously, a recurring fitness class that allowed for easy, casual encounters. I began to anticipate her movements with military precision, envisioning the intersections of opportunity and exposure. I called a friend, Mark, a lawyer with a penchant for theatrics, and spun him the story. I left out certain details, but I emphasized the betrayal, the audacity, and the potential for a dramatic revelation. Mark laughed in disbelief. "You are living in a reality television show," he said, his voice equal parts concern and amusement. But the point was clear. I had an ally, someone who could help me orchestrate the exposure without losing my mind in the process. That evening, I made my move. I invited Lauren to dinner under the pretense of reconciliation, choosing a restaurant with an outdoor patio, intimate lighting, and strategically positioned surveillance cameras. My paranoia had reached cinematic levels. Lauren arrived in a blue dress, the kind that once made my heart race, now only making it pound with fury. She smiled, oblivious to the fact that her world was about to shift in ways she could not anticipate. I let the conversation begin casually. The first minutes were filled with banalities: work, family, trivial updates. Danny had a soccer game on Saturday. I asked about her mother. I nodded, laughed at the appropriate moments. But beneath the surface, I was constructing a trap. I began to weave in subtle questions, innocuous references to hotels, elevators, and conference rooms. I watched her reaction carefully. Every micro-expression, every twitch of a brow, every delayed answer became a thread in the tapestry of betrayal I was unraveling. The absurdity of it all gnawed at me. Here I was, orchestrating a drama worthy of primetime television, all because a cheating wife had decided that honesty was negotiable. I imagined cameras capturing every nuance, commentators dissecting every glance, Reddit threads exploding with hashtags like cheating wife and betrayal. I could almost hear the whispers. This is the ultimate family drama. Watch as trust crumbles before your eyes. And yet, the stakes were real. Danny's understanding of family, our shared life, hung precariously in the balance. After the appetizer, I transitioned into the revelation. I produced my phone and, with an almost theatrical flourish, displayed the photos from the hotel suite. Lauren's smile faltered, her posture stiffened. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a mixture of panic and disbelief. I watched her carefully, savoring the moment when reality collided with her deception. The cheating wife she thought she was being so cunningly had been caught, not by a stranger, not by a friend, but by me, the husband she had underestimated. Lauren's attempts to explain were frantic, patchwork narratives of business trips, coincidences, and misunderstandings. I let her talk, letting the absurdity of her excuses underscore the theatricality of the scene. I imagined a conspiracy board with red strings, connecting every lie, every hotel stay, every whispered conversation. In my mind, it was almost fantastical. Lauren, my cheating wife, was the protagonist in a global saga of infidelity, and I was the lone detective, unraveling the threads with surgical precision. The confrontation escalated. Lauren's demeanor shifted from panic to anger, the kind of rage that comes from being exposed, from losing control of a narrative she had crafted so carefully. I mirrored her intensity with calm, calculated detachment. Betrayal, I realized, was not just emotional, it was performative. It required an audience, even if that audience was a single person armed with evidence. I laid out the consequences: our family, our home, the trust that could never be rebuilt without complete transparency. I spoke of Danny, of the life we had promised him, and of the integrity that had been compromised. The climax of the evening took on an almost surreal quality. I suggested a hypothetical scenario in which the photos were made public, in which the betrayal was revealed to friends, colleagues, and even strangers. I watched as fear replaced defiance in her eyes. It was absurd, theatrical, yet effective. The cheating wife who had believed she could navigate infidelity with impunity now faced the possibility of social and familial reckoning, and in that moment, I felt an intoxicating sense of power, the equilibrium of betrayal temporarily restored in my favor. But the story did not end there. In the weeks that followed, Lauren's attempts at reconciliation became a complex dance of guilt, manipulation, and fleeting charm. I allowed myself small indulgences in paranoia and imagination, picturing elaborate schemes, secret meetings, and the occasional absurd twist: a hotel lobby ambush, a fake incrimination by a neighbor, and an anonymous tip to a gossip columnist. The narrative shifted from real-life betrayal to something almost fantastical, a parody of marital infidelity, a spectacle that straddled the line between reality and fiction. By the end of the month, Lauren had been confronted, exposed, and made to acknowledge the depth of her betrayal. Our family remained fractured, yet the clarity of truth provided a foundation for reconstruction. Betrayal, family, infidelity, cheating wife, they were no longer abstract concepts lurking in the shadows. They were tangible realities, cataloged, confronted, and, in a sense, mastered. And I had navigated the absurd, the theatrical, and the conspiratorial with the precision of a man who had been forced to become both detective and dramatist, husband and orchestrator, in the peculiar theater of human deception. The morning after our confrontation, I woke to silence, the kind of silence that presses against your skull like a cold sheet of glass. I did not feel triumphant nor vindictive. I felt strangely untethered, suspended between the absurd reality of what had happened and the theatrical narrative my mind had constructed over the past weeks. My cheating wife, Lauren, had been confronted, her lies exposed, yet the story was far from over. In fact, it had only begun to take on the flavor of a darkly comedic epic, one that might be chronicled on Reddit under titles like "Cheating Wife Caught in Hotel Suite," "Husband's Revenge is Stranger Than Fiction." I poured a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma grounding me as I reviewed the digital evidence once more. Each photo, each time-stamped message was a testament not just to her infidelity, but to the fragility of perception. I imagined a parallel universe where the roles were reversed, where I was the one sneaking into clandestine meetings, and Lauren, the omnipotent overseer, orchestrating a fantastical scenario of espionage and domestic intrigue. The absurdity of it all was not lost on me. Life had transformed into a parody of a conspiracy thriller, with our home as the epicenter of secret plots, hidden cameras, and imagined betrayals. By noon, I had implemented my plan for public accountability, not in the sense of shaming her to friends or colleagues, but rather in a structured, almost bureaucratic fashion that mirrored corporate audits. I created a timeline of infidelity, complete with receipts, hotel invoices, and location stamps, and presented it as a formal dossier. The intent was not humiliation, but clarity, a means for our family to see the architecture of betrayal laid bare, stripped of excuses and rationalizations. I mailed copies to myself, stored digital versions in encrypted folders, and even drafted a hypothetical Reddit post, though I never published it. The cheating wife's story was mine to control, at least in narrative form, if not in emotional consequence. Lauren's reaction to this dossier was predictably theatrical. She oscillated between shock, remorse, and calculated charm, each emotion displayed as if she were auditioning for a reality television show. I watched her carefully, cataloging expressions that betrayed both fear and defiance. It occurred to me that the entire scenario, our confrontation, the hotel discovery, even my elaborate planning, had become performative. In exposing her infidelity, I had unintentionally created a stage, and we were both actors trapped in a domestic drama that straddled the line between realism and parody. Our family life, however, demanded more than theatrics. Danny, our son, remained blissfully unaware of the depth of betrayal, his world still defined by soccer games, school projects, and the comforting routines of childhood. I realized that in protecting him, I had to perform the role of normalcy, even as my internal narrative unraveled in increasingly fantastical directions. Lauren attempted to negotiate a return to routine, presenting apologies, gifts, and promises, but I met each gesture with measured skepticism. Infidelity, I reminded myself, was not merely a breach of trust. It was an act that demanded accountability, reflection, and, most importantly, transformation. In the days that followed, the absurdity of reality mingled with imagined conspiracies. I found myself constructing elaborate scenarios in which Lauren's past actions were part of a coordinated global operation of betrayal, a secret cabal that trained spouses in the art of deception. I entertained thoughts of clandestine meetings, encrypted messages, and shadowy figures monitoring marital fidelity across the nation. It was as if the cheating wife had become the central figure in a mythic narrative of infidelity, and I, the unwilling chronicler, tasked with documenting the arcane rituals of emotional treachery. Yet, beneath the parody and imagined conspiracies, practical matters demanded attention. Therapy sessions were scheduled for Lauren and myself, not as a guarantee of reconciliation, but as a means of unpacking the layers of betrayal that had accrued over years. We discussed accountability, the erosion of trust, and the mechanisms by which infidelity had infiltrated our family structure. It was painfully mundane, yet necessary. Infidelity was no longer a story of passion and secrecy. It was a documented pattern that required structured intervention, much like a corporate audit of ethical compliance. And then came the unexpected twist, a narrative turn that might have seemed contrived if it were in a novel or film. Lauren began to uncover her own vulnerabilities, her past decisions, and the motivations that had driven her toward the affair. She admitted that her actions were not merely about desire, but about fear, insecurity, and the pressure to perform within a social and professional context. The cheating wife I had once viewed as a singular agent of betrayal was revealed to be a product of broader forces, societal expectations, professional hierarchies, and the complex interplay of personal inadequacies. I found this realization simultaneously sobering and ironic, the parody of conspiracy giving way to the gravity of human complexity. I began documenting these reflections, creating a journal that combined evidence, observations, and philosophical musings. Betrayal, I wrote, was both personal and systemic. Infidelity was an artifact of opportunity, desire, and human weakness. Family structures were fragile, yet resilient, capable of surviving exposure, confrontation, and even the surreal theater of imagined conspiracies. The cheating wife had been the catalyst, the spark that illuminated both the absurdity and the profundity of domestic life. Months passed. Danny remained unaware of the intricacies of adult deceit, finding joy in routines and milestones. Lauren continued her therapy, slowly transforming acknowledgement of guilt into practical steps toward change. I monitored her progress with a blend of skepticism and cautious hope, recognizing that the path from infidelity to integrity was neither linear nor guaranteed. The hotel room incident remained a pivotal reference point, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the necessity of vigilance. In the final reckoning, I realized that my story was as much about me as it was about Lauren. The cheating wife had catalyzed a journey through betrayal, family dysfunction, and the absurd theater of human behavior. I had navigated the extremes of paranoia, channeled the energy of parody, and constructed elaborate scenarios that blended reality with imagined conspiracies. In doing so, I discovered the resilience required to confront infidelity without being consumed by it, the clarity to document betrayal without being defined by it, and the courage to reclaim a sense of family without succumbing to revenge. Ultimately, the saga concluded not with public humiliation or dramatic retaliation, but with controlled exposure, structured accountability, and a measured restoration of order. Betrayal had been confronted, infidelity had been documented, and family bonds had been acknowledged in both their fragility and resilience. The cheating wife, once a figure of theatrical deceit, had become a subject of scrutiny, reflection, and, cautiously, reintegration. And I, the husband, had navigated a labyrinth of deception, absurdity, and imagination, to arrive at a place where clarity, humor, and cautious optimism intersected. An American domestic drama transformed into both cautionary tale and fantastical narrative, with betrayal, family, and infidelity etched indelibly into its arc. As I closed my journal and looked across the living room at Lauren, I felt a strange sense of equilibrium. The absurdity remained, the parody lingered, but the raw, unvarnished truth had been confronted. The cheating wife had been exposed, the betrayal catalogued, and the family, though forever changed, had a path forward. Reality, satire, and imagination had collided, creating a story that was uniquely ours, a story of deception, confrontation, and cautious redemption, told in the language of modern American life, infused with drama, parody, and the inexorable complexities of human behavior.